exact narrative content of the dream is influenced by three things, all right? And these things can be clearly ordered at temporal scale. So these three things are, firstly, greetings, this is Eugene the Philosopher, the greatest living philosopher after the unfortunate passing of Quentin Robert de Nameland, who has been the greatest living philosopher before me. In this video, I wish to talk about sleep and dreams, and like the mechanics of sleep and what the content, factual content of dreams, alright? So, what is sleep, or like the dream? It's basically like a bunch of experiences, let's say, wrapped up in some like moving objects, right? And perhaps making sounds, and perhaps making you feel some tactile, sensations, etc., right? But, so since these are objects, let me remind you what I think about objects in the first place. So watch my video, Mythology as Cultural Basis. I'm gonna link it in the description if you want a more longer description, but a brief description of an object is such. An object is a sum of our perceptions, let's say, organized in a single entity. So objects are basically shortcuts which allow us to organize our perceptions more efficiently, alright? So let's say we have a sum of a perception of, again, some tactile perception, some hearing, some I don't know, a feeling of like temperature, some smell, and perhaps even some taste and vision, for example, right? And we kind of wrap it all together and produce a single object, let's say, again, a proverbial table. So the table makes sound when you knock on it, right? You can actually touch it, you can see it, you can maybe like lick it or whatever, you know, you can smell it. So, and the sum of these perceptions, like, you organize into a single entity, which you call a table, alright? That's the basic pattern of an object construction. It's what is called constructivism in philosophy, right? That's what it's dealing with, and it's completely sound, I would say. And so, returning to the subject of dreams, the basic pattern of dreams, in this context at least, is your mind is trying to organize like all the chaos of your experiences and perceptions into these comprehensible patterns, comprehensible objects. Again, sort of like condense all this chaos into a series of objects, alright? And situations, by the way, in which these objects may find themselves in. Sort of wrap them into metaphors, if you wish. And they don't necessarily, like the resulting objects, don't necessarily fit with each other, you know, and hence the apparent chaos of the narrative of the dream, right? It's like, again, the proverbial point that dreams don't really make sense, all right? Like, they of course make sense within themselves, like within the context of the dream, like whatever happens in a dream makes sense, and it's always the case, right? It's only on the next day when you think about it, you think, what kind of rubbish was that, you know? So, why do they make sense within a dream? Because they are your actual experiences. Like, they are just as real as any other experience that you have, because these are actual experiences that you had, or have even, during the sleep. Alright? But, the narrative, the situation, like, depicted in the dream, if you wish, is not necessarily making sense in the real world. Like, when you're trying to actually model, like when you're remembering and trying to imagine the same situation in the real world. Just because you've taken all these experiences that you, again, condense into objects within the dream from different situations. Perhaps along the whole span of your lifetime, but we'll talk about this like a minute later. So, since you've taken them from different places, all these perceptions, when put together, they might not make sense. And that's like basically why dreams look a bit chaotic and like nonsensical, at least sometimes, most of the time, let's say. So ultimately, the only thing that really ties the dream together, if you wish, ties the dream's narrative together, is you, alright? Because it is you who have this sum of perceptions and experiences that are depicted as objects acting within your dream. So in a way, all your dreams are unique just because you are unique. And I'm not saying it like as a sort of a tap on the back. I literally mean that, because no human being has the same sort of experiences as another human being. Like even if you, I don't know, take twins or whatever as an example, they would still have pretty different experiences. Not as different as like two completely random people, but still pretty different. So, let's now talk about the exact narrative content of the dream. So, in the exact narrative content of the dream, three things are very influential. And these things can actually be clearly ordered in temporal scale. So, these three things are, firstly, immediate experiences during the sleep itself, right? And I'm mostly talking about physiological experiences, like when you're actually sleeping, like, and somebody, like something is acting upon you, or you have some feeling, right, in your body, for example. Like, I like this example from Nietzsche, who actually had like an aphorism, exactly about this topic. He gave an example of a belt, I think, wrapped around somebody's leg or something. I'm not sure why was it leg precisely, but it doesn't really matter. And he says, well, okay, if a belt is wrapped around your leg, I don't know, maybe it's like a soldier sleeping in a trench or something. Then he may see in his dream that there's like a snake wrapping around his leg, for example, right? So his interpretational part of his mind, let's say, is trying to figure out what's going on. Why do I have this sensation, right? And like, well, maybe there's a snake wrapping around my leg or something like that. And who knows, like maybe within the context of the dream it would kind of make sense. Or maybe not, I don't know. So I've had similar examples, and I'm pretty sure you've had a lot of similar examples. Like one time, like maybe a couple of years ago, but for some reason I remember that, like, I've had a dream where somebody was choking me or something like that. And then when I woke up, I actually found out that, like, you know, I've had my, I was sleeping like that, basically, with my hand like this. So that's what was the source of this sensation. Or, like, I remember one specific, like, very, very stark example from my childhood. So we had a cat, and the cat was in the room where we were sleeping. Like, I was sleeping with my mom, I think, back then. I don't know, maybe I was like, I don't know, I don't remember how old I was, but pretty young, let's say. So the cat was trying to exit the room and scratching on the door, like, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And in my dream, what I saw was like some sort of ghost, like in a very, like, you know, darkish, like pale green, I don't know, design, let's say, with a lantern, and the lantern was like swinging, and there were like all kinds of ghosty mist around it, and it was the lantern while it was swinging making these noises, like shh, shh, shh. So it was kind of funny. So I remembered that pretty well because it was like so, I don't know, like the contrast was so stark, you know. Okay, so yeah. And again, I'm pretty sure you can come up with multiple examples like these from your own life. So these experiences during your sleep could be more vague. Like what I've given you are kind of obvious, right? But they could be more vague. Like they could be like you're literally like the working of your digestion, for example, or like the changes of your blood pressure, or like the changes in your body or room temperature, or like the temperature around you, or like slight gust of wind from the window or something like that, or other tactile perceptions or things like that. And all of that can manifest itself in some form. Like in a form of some emotion, let's say, or like a state of mind in your dream, alright? And I'm not sure how it works with women, but for men, because I don't have a first-hand experience of being a woman. But for men, I can tell you that, a certain physiological reaction, if you know what I mean, I'm trying to be very careful here, with wording, also can cause inappropriate imagery, in the dream itself, right? So when you are physiologically aroused, and many men are, actually, like, I think all, or at least most of men, during the sleep experience this sort of physiological reaction. So sometimes, not always though, it may be accompanied by the appropriate imagery, if you know what I mean. Alright. So that was point number one. The immediate experiences, physiological mostly experiences during your sleep, right? They impact directly the content, the factual content of your dream. Then the second aspect is like more stretched out in time types of experiences, and more specifically and most importantly, the experiences you've had in the previous day. So yesterday, like the day when you went to sleep, basically, right? And these could be like twofold. Firstly, these are your emotions, if they were like strong enough and like long enough. They may manifest themselves in your dream somehow. Or they could be more abstract. I mean, by emotions, I mean like, again, like state of mind, sort of like mood, maybe, would be a better word. Or that's one possibility. And the other would be like symbols or ideas, right? So more rational, more abstract kind of thing. So both of these, both your like emotions and moods that you've had most importantly in the previous day, and the abstract concepts of ideas that you've like thought about during the day, again, provide a reasonable amount of, I like the German word Faktur, like texture or substance or, I don't know, substrate, for the images, in your dream, like again, when you go to sleep on that day. Like again, the proverbial examples would be like, well, when you're running away from some like villain or a monster during your sleep, you're feeling super slow and you can't run, right? Or like being naked in public or something. So these are all like very typical manifestations of very typical emotional or like mood-like reactions that people had in the previous day. At least I think so. I mean, there are probably some other explanations for that. They may be partly physiological as well, by the way, but I believe that this is a good example anyway for this second point that I'm making. And literally today, for example, when I woke up, today is August 2nd of 2022. So when I woke up, I was more or less able actually to track back to yesterday, August 1st, what I saw in my dreams. I've actually had a very long sequence of dreams. By the way, okay, never mind. So I've had a very long sequence of dreams, but so I didn't actually remember most of it, but the last ones that I did remember in the morning, I was able to trace like almost exactly to what I thought about, what I saw like on YouTube, etc., what I like experienced, like, these mood-like things yesterday, etc. And I don't know, maybe it's like an exercise for you if you're curious. Try to do that as well. I'm pretty sure you're gonna find a lot of like you might think, oh, why did I actually saw this in my dream? It might be important, or it might be just that you thought about this literally yesterday and saw it literally yesterday. Like if you think about it carefully, like on many occasions, you would be able to trace it back like this. Okay. So that's the second point, right? Like a more stretched out in time states that you still have in your, like more or less fresh in your memory. And the third one would be like a very long, things, that go on in your life. Like it could be like, that can manifest in your dream. This could be like some sort of a project you're working on, like literally on your job, for example, or like in your like creative activity, or in your like personal life, like you're thinking about like your marriage or your children or like your girlfriend or boyfriend or I don't know, whatever. Things like that. So things that are like very stretched in time. All right. Like, and very, I mean, like a month at least, something like that. Like some deep, long-standing concerns, and problems, that you have in your life. The long-term narration of your life, if you wish. So it's the third thing that can manifest, in your dream. All right. At any given moment, actually. And, the proverbial example of people like finding solutions to problems in the dreams, right? Which I completely agree. It might happen. And I mean, there are like legendary examples of Mendeleev, like developing the periodic table of elements in his sleep, apparently, and many others like that. So I like and again, I completely agree that this might happen. And I mean, it completely falls into like the general scheme that I've provided you, for what happens in the dream, right? These are your long-standing like experiences and perceptions, right? Directly manifesting in a dream, in this particular case. So Poincare, for example, who is like, arguably, in my opinion at least, like the best scientist of the early 20th century. So he had a point in one of his books. I don't remember which one. I've read like 3 of them in a row, so I can't exactly remember. So he said that he like how he conceptualizes working with like these kind of difficult problems. And why actually, by the way, this not only applies to scientists, it also applies to writers specifically, because many people said that they're writing in this style. Like I think Mark Twain said that he works like this. So, okay, let me firstly give you an example. So Mark Twain, for example, I'm not sure it was Mark Twain, but like pretty sure, but not exactly sure. But anyway, some writers, let's say, work like this. They kind of write a lot of like draft style stuff, right? But then they think, well, how do I organize this? What do I should add? Like, it doesn't seem to like fit, like something's missing. I can't really like work with this right now. And then they just like put it, you know, in a drawer. And when they return to this very same draft, like, I don't know, half a year later, for example, they say, well, it's so easy. Like, I can work with this. Like, boom, everything is ready, right? The novel is, written. And Poincare gives the same, pretty much the same point about like working on some scientific problems. He says that, so the conception he arrives at, the concept rather, is like, he imagines like the problems as like almost like boards with certain elements attached to them. Imagine like a board with like magnets, like put on it or something. And he says like when you're thinking like thoroughly, about a problem, so you're like almost like removing one magnet and like considering it and looking at it, etc., but then maybe putting it back, then removing another and like looking at it and then maybe putting it back, etc. But you can't seem to make sense, like organize them properly. But he says that when you've like considered every one of these separately, they kind of stay in your like long-term memory, right? And then, so you kind of have to leave it for some time and then return maybe again, like, I don't know, a month later, or like half a year later. And it would like, it might happen that you would be able to organize it because, like, again, you would have like more energy because you're like, you know, you don't have this, I don't know the proper metaphor in English. Well, you're not tired of this problem yet because like, you kind of, for you, it's kind of a new problem, alright? Because there was such a stretch of time between your last visiting it. and now. But still, something remains in your memory. Like you remember all of these elements, and you remember vaguely, at least, the problems you've had with like arranging them initially. And so the solution might actually already be there. Like you may already know how to solve this puzzle. So you might actually enact it. You might actually solve it. Because again, like you don't really stop thinking about it. You just stopped actively considering the elements. But it's still like, what he says precisely, Poincare, is that these magnets kind of become suspended in air, you know? Like when you go away from the problem. So when you come back to it, they're still suspended, and now you can actually arrange them in the proper order, right? It's kind of like a very long shot type of a metaphor, but I just remembered it, and I think it works on some level. Maybe a better metaphor is possible, but I don't know. I'm not aware of it yet. And I haven't tried to make such myself. All right. So it's probably time to conclude this rant. So what we talked about in this video is like the mechanics of sleep itself, right? I said that the sleep is basically working on the same rails, you might say, as creating objects in general, which is basically organizing the sum of our perceptions into single entities. And then, so the sleep attempts, the dream, not the sleep itself, but the dream attempts to organize the sum of your experiences into a bunch of objects that interact with each other somehow, alright? Thus, it may not always make sense because your experiences are very different, you know, very diverse, let's say, right? And the exact narrative content of the dream is influenced by three things, all right? And these things can be clearly ordered at temporal scale. So these three things are, firstly, the immediate experiences that you have during the sleep. They manifest themselves as objects in your dream, and they're doing something, or not necessarily objects, situations, moods, emotions, things like that, right? Secondly, your more long-term experiences, most importantly, experiences during your previous day before you went to sleep. And thirdly, like the very long-standing problems, situations, issues you're dealing with in your life. They might also surface in a dream in some way. All right. So that's three things that, again, you can see that they're like, you know, Russian doll type of nested structure. Like the immediate experiences are wrapped up in more long-term experiences, and which are wrapped up in the largest subset of these more stretched out in time types of experiences. All right. So as a PS, I would just mention that in your dream, you're really like almost like creating worlds, you know, like you're almost a god, you know, because all the distractions are removed, right? Like your mind just freely roams. Like whatever your mind is trying to enact in the real world, like actually by moving your body, by speaking, by, I don't know, imagining things, it does so in a dream, like completely unshackled, right? Like it's completely free to do whatever it wishes. And also one interesting point to note, I think Tim Ferriss had this point, like this famous self-help guy. So he noted, and very justifiably, that the blood flow pattern is pretty different during the sleep, right? Like with respect to just regular walking around or even sitting. Again, first, like the biggest difference is that you're lying down, all right? Which like elevates your blood pressure actually, and it makes like the blood makes the head more accessible to blood because you're on the same level. It's on the same level as legs. So he actually, Tim Ferriss gives an advice that, like, for creative thinking, you know, like if you're thinking about some problem, maybe just go and lie down, because that would put you in a different state, and again, different physiological state, just as we've discussed. So maybe solution would come, and you wouldn't even have to go to sleep as Mendeleev did or something. Alright, I think that will be all. Thank you for watching. The eons are closing.